Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Nigeria is open for business. For the first time in more than 2 decades, a Nigerian leader sets out on a state visit to France. President Bola Tinubu's wooing ramped up investment from Paris as the African heavyweight grapples a cost of living crisis. Also, at least 15 are killed and dozens of others are missing in devastating landslides in eastern Uganda. Rescue workers race against time to try to free those still trapped beneath the soil as heavy rains continue. And faced with the mounting cost of getting an education in Chad, we hear from one NGO trying to help families bridge budgeting gaps to get and keep their kids in school. But first, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is in France on a rare state visit, wooing more investment from Paris. Nigeria is the continent's top oil producer and, from music to film to literature to fashion, a mighty exporter of culture. But since taking office last year, Tinubu has seen the country shaken by a cost of living crisis. The leader's made much, though, of his determination to do what it takes to attract more private money to Nigerian projects.
The Franco-Nigerian business role is so important, and trade and investment has been integral to this partnership. As discussed earlier on, we need to do more, promote more, invest more in very important areas.
Well, France has also made much of Nigeria as it pivots towards Anglophone heavyweights in Africa amidst a decline of its influence in French-speaking Africa. So for more on the promise and potential problems of the Elysée and Abuja's push to lock elbows even tighter, I'm joined by Dr. Catherine Nwajiaku-Dahu, who heads up politics and governance at the ODI Global Think Tank. Doctor, thanks so much for making the time to speak to me. Now, first of all, France's relationship with Nigeria is not a new one. Nigeria was France's #1 trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa last year. So what is all that we're seeing today about? Where and why may there be more room to grow in this relationship? And do you think that one side stands to gain more out of this than the other?
You're indeed right. Thanks for having me on the programme. You're indeed right. I mean, this is not a new relationship. Nigeria has been a long-standing, important trading partner for France. Its most important trading partner, in fact, more important in many respects than its former colonial power, the UK. And what's shifted now is an intensification of that relationship against a backdrop of post-Brexit, which has changed the opportunities that Nigeria has. So in answer to your question, is this a mutually beneficial relationship as it's being presented by both President Tinubu and President Macron? In many ways, it is mutually beneficial in terms of elites, in terms of business, certainly, but mutually beneficial for Nigerians, the majority, well, at least half of the population that currently living below the poverty line, I think we would have to ask additional questions. Nigeria has gone through an extensive currency devaluation in the last year, as well as the removal of fuel subsidies, which have crippled local economies, put people beyond the poverty line, and created an economic crisis of proportions not hitherto seen in Nigeria. So if you were to ask Nigerians, I was in Nigeria a couple of weeks ago, if you were to ask Nigerians whether they had confidence in this mutually beneficial relationship, I think they would first of all be asking why Nigeria's currency has been so devalued. Beneficial for trade with France, certainly, because against the euro, the naira is doing very poorly, but not for Nigerians themselves. I've noted also that the French, the French president as well as the Nigerian president are putting forward the beneficial effects for Nigeria in terms of, the opportunities for skills development and training for young people, as well as opportunities for the culture industries and so on in terms of trade. But they also put an accent, a prioritization on questions around climate. This being a beneficial relationship for Nigeria because there could be possibly climate adaptation finance emerging from this. This is in stark contradiction with what's happening with one of the major French companies investing in Nigeria, which is Total Energies. Which will continue to push for more investments in oil and gas, and also withdraw from those refineries or those that have not been beneficial and selling them off to Nigerian companies. These questions are critical for Nigerians suffering the effects of climate change, but also the effects of extreme environmental pollution, notably in states of the Niger Delta, that mean that just transition or questions of just transition or transitioning away from fossil fuels are meaningless if they don't deal with the environmental pollution crisis that many face. I've just come back from Nigeria presenting a report precisely on this that the Bayelsa state government put forward and would like to be seeing in any mutually beneficial trading relationship something done about one of France's major companies and their oil environmental pollution footprint in the country.
Catherine, so even though we've established that France and Nigeria, they've been working together for a substantial amount of time. It's been a pretty long time since a head of state from Nigeria has set foot on a state visit in France and has been met with such pomp. What do you think that what we have seen on this state visit says about maybe the bigger picture of the changes that we're seeing in the diplomatic and economic relationships that Africa may be or should be courting on the global stage going forward?
I think there is a presentational, performative element to this visit that one cannot underestimate. This is a context in which the continent of Africa has, particularly the Francophone parts of the continent, have signaled, in the Sahel I'm talking about, a big no more France message, which has been heard loud and clear. I don't want to exaggerate in saying that the reason why France is moving in to demonstrate this mutually beneficial relationship with Nigeria is because of that, because of course we've just said that it predates that. But given the geopolitical context in which there are opportunities for African countries, particularly of Nigeria's size and status, it becomes even more important to demonstrate the importance of the relationship. The UK, for example, is also interested in investing more in Nigeria, but is not necessarily welcoming the head of state with the same pomp and ceremony. So it's performatively very significant.
Thank you so much for that breakdown. Dr. Catherine Nwajiaku-Dahu there speaking to me about the significance of President Bola Tinubu's visit to France. In other news, 6 villages in the Bulambuli district of eastern Uganda have been completely wiped out by landslides triggered by heavy rains. At least 15 have died and over 100 others are still missing. Hundreds of survivors have lost their homes. Our regional correspondent brings us more.
6 villages in the Bulambuli district of eastern Uganda have been completely buried under the earth. At least 15 people, mostly children, have died and over 100 others are missing following landslides triggered by heavy rains. Videos shared on social media show Muzugo village and its 20 homes swept away by mudslides. Hundreds of people are now homeless in the region. The Red Cross and local authorities have called on the government to assist the affected residents. On Wednesday, Kampala had issued a disaster alert.
The government is now procuring more land, but you can see what has happened. So let it be, I don't know what emergency, I don't know what word to use, but let people be removed from this area because the rains are continuing. You can see all the hills, the waterfalls, all over. The rains are too heavy. Let people be removed immediately. And my appeal to the people here is let's move and stay with relatives, but let's just leave this place.
In this high-altitude region of Mount Elgon, one of the waterways feeding the Nile downstream overflowed due to the rains. Located about 5 hours from the capital, Kampala, this area frequently experiences landslides which worsen during the rainy season. This Wednesday, November 27th, could mark the worst human toll from such a disaster in Uganda. 2 years ago, 15 people also lost their lives in landslides in Kasese in the west of the country.
Well, Namibia's election authorities announced 2 extra days of voting at 36 polling stations after logistical failures stopped many from casting ballots in Wednesday's general election. The polls are the ruling SWAPO party's most contested since the country gained independence from South Africa in 1990. Opposition parties say that they have now lost confidence in the process and have called for vote counting to be stopped. And staying with Namibia, its communications regulatory authorities issued a cease and desist order to satellite internet provider Starlink for operating without a license. Now, Starlink's a unit of SpaceX, a company co-founded by tech business billionaire Elon Musk. Starlink, has reportedly submitted an application for a Namibian telecommunications service license, but the file is still under review, and therefore the company's still not legally allowed to operate in the country. And a former Liberian warlord whose nonchalant brutality shocked the world has died. Prince Johnson was a key player in the country's back-to-back civil wars throughout the 90s. And he left behind a legacy of violence when he died aged 72 on Thursday.
This is Prince Johnson, one of the key militia leaders during Liberia's civil war. He was known for his cruelty. This is a video of Johnson sipping beer as his henchmen tortured then-President Samuel Doe to death in 1990. A few days later, Prince Johnson was seen celebrating with his family. The gruesome killing of Doe plunged Liberia into 2 civil wars between 1989 and 2003 that resulted in the death of 250,000 people and ravaged Liberia's economy. He helped Charles Taylor become the president of Liberia, who would later be convicted of crimes against humanity. As for Prince Johnson, he went on to become an influential political player, and he never expressed regret over his past actions and was never tried.
It is not hard to tell you I've changed. It's my action that proved I've changed. See the enormous support I got in the country. Enormous support.
Prince Johnson became a major figure in Liberian politics, enjoying considerable impunity, embodying both the horrors of war and the challenges of peace in Liberia.
So it's been a few weeks since schools reopened in Chad, but many classrooms are still missing students. Hikes to fees, supplies and transport have increasingly meant that poorer families struggle to afford their kids' education. Our team, though, tells us about efforts being made to make school more accessible to those who need more financial support. Take a look.
In Tomagoni Mahamat's household, it's the daughters who take on the daily chore of fetching water for the family. A mother of 6, Tomagoni could not afford to send her kids to school this year. Public school may be free in Chad, but transport and supplies still cost too much for some families.
Rent, food and other household expenses take up almost all my budget. That's why I could not enroll them. I'd need help quickly. Where we live now, there isn't a public school nearby, only private schools, and they're not cheap. Private school registration costs around 40,000 CFA francs per child, and I just can't afford it.
Tomagoni makes her way to Al Musa Ada's headquarters. For the second year, the group is running a campaign to support the most vulnerable families. They help cover school expenses for children until parents get back on their feet financially. The members of the association regularly try to raise awareness within the government.
Last year, we sent a letter requesting a meeting with the Prime Minister. We wanted to use this opportunity to explain the context of our project and advocate for orphans, particularly those who have lost both parents, to be given equal opportunities. But so far, there's been no response.
The government, however, says it's made substantial efforts to support the education of thousands of young Chadians.
There are initiatives that, for example, provide school uniforms to children from underprivileged families. It's another step in the right direction. The government also hands out free textbooks.
Getting more children into school and keeping them there longer remains a top priority in Chad. In 2023, just 60% of elementary school students made it to middle school.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though. And do so again if you can. Till then, take care.